Hi, you've run across the 6th video in my series catching up newcomers and refreshing fans on the Kingdom Hearts series in time for Kingdom Hearts 3. I advise you check the previous 5 videos before this one if you have the time, or at least know the first 5 titles before this one. As a quick rundown, this video is running off the assumption that you are familiar with Kingdom Hearts Final Mix, Rechain of Memories, Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix, 358 Days Over 2, and Birth by Sleep Final Mix. We are wrapping up this middle trilogy as it were, so let's get started. Some usual context prelude. The original Kingdom Hearts Coded was originally the 4th game in the series, released exclusively in Japan episodically on a specific brand of cell phone as a puzzle game of sorts over the course of almost 2 years around the releases of both Days and Birth by Sleep. So needless to say, this was one title that wasn't exactly import friendly. Naturally, the game was remade into a full standalone game for the Nintendo DS for worldwide consumption, considering it's now the 6th title in the franchise and is thus considered canon. Releasing worldwide in early 2011, months after Birth by Sleep, it was rebranded Recoded and was the final of the 3 announced games in the handheld trilogy to finally release. Similar to Days before it, Recoded was then remade into an HD recap film for the 2.5 HD Remix collection, which is what I'll be largely focusing on again. I'll pay some lip service to the DS game, but I will be focusing largely on the story, even though this game has a reputation above all the others for being the most skippable entry in the series. Keep that in mind, because I have the sneaking suspicion that Nomura is determined to passive-aggressively punish those with this particular belief. Regardless, it's the final game in the second act trilogy, and I will cover it nonetheless. Let's dive back into this technical sequel to Kingdom Hearts 2. Kingdom Hearts Recoded begins with the promise Sora made to Nominate during his ending of Chain of Memories before his nearly year-long sleep. Another replay of the Planet B remix of Simple and Clean follows, set to footage from the previous 5 titles to varying degrees. It mostly focuses on the 2 mainline numbered entries, the events of Chain of Memories, Days, and Birth by Sleep, given fleeting glimpses for plot reasons. After the song ends, we're presented with both of Jiminy's journals where he wrote down the events of Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2, since Recoded takes place after the main bulk of Kingdom Hearts 2 ended. As such, when Jiminy's looking over both journals at Disney Castle, he runs across the mysterious Thank Nominee message they wrote for her at the end of Chain of Memories that they no longer remember writing, alongside a new message he definitely doesn't remember writing. This is the main focus of Recoded, with Jiminy going off to King Mickey to help assist in the second mysterious message that appeared at the end of the first journal. Their hurting will be mended when you return to end it. While only 2 pages have messages on them, Mickey decides to expand upon one of the crazier aspects introduced in Kingdom Hearts 2. To find out what's behind the messages, they decide to digitize the journal and decode the information it possesses, despite the words being gone, as Mickey puts it. Recoded fittingly deals with data as the main theme this time around, and it's going to get weirder if you aren't prepared for this thanks to Kingdom Hearts 2. It's also a much brighter affair overall in tone. While Days and Birth by Sleep were in a race to make you feel something, Recoded's content with simply trying to entertain you, especially as a game. As usual, I'm primarily dealing with the HD film recap of the game on the 2.5 HD Remix collection here, but I will throw in a few cents on the gameplay of the DS original title, which I do honestly enjoy, and I'm sort of sad it's being lost to time for the, well, time being. The yellow logo and general upbeatness of this version of Dearly Beloved, and a focus on the data theme is appreciated, even if most do consider this game to be the most skippable of the franchise, and we will get to that. Back to the introduction. Mickey and Jiminy get assistance from Chip and Dale to digitize the first journal, reminding everyone that Jiminy Cricket's the one that writes these. They're super tiny that only he and the Chipmunks would be able to normally read them. Donald and Goofy are also present when they hear the commotion, successfully uploading the journal as data, an alarm blaring shortly afterwards. While attempting to regain the worlds that were written in the journal from the first game, a bunch of bugs appear on screen and begin corrupting the data. Continuing his sage advice, Goofy suggests that they have someone fix the data from the inside, Chip and Dale rewriting Sora's data inside the journal to gain a Keyblade and assist them. Donald and Goofy ask the appropriate questions for necessary clarifications. This Data Sora is a recreation of the real Sora circa Kingdom Hearts Final Mix, as he was already written about by Jiminy during the events of that game and is thus in the journal. Data Sora is repurposed to wield a Keyblade in order to help debug the journal's corrupted data, seen in various forms of bug blocks. He is thus tasked by Mickey to help them debug the worlds in the journal in an attempt to discover who was hurting in the second message. Since Sora helped save the worlds in the real world, they think he can do it here. Good enough of a reason for a video game, I suppose. With Chip and Dale leaving the room to go investigate the various warnings, Mickey, Jiminy, Donald, and Goofy watch as Datasaur is confronted by a figure in a familiar-looking black cloak. Not recalling ever writing about this character, Mickey instructs Sora to follow him in his digital recreation of his dive to the heart. The game does the usual tutorials here, so we'll skip most of the gameplay that isn't worth a mention. And on that note, I'll briefly discuss the basic combat. Don't worry, this will be very brief. You see, Recoded brings back the deck command system that was first seen in Birth by Sleep, which is a plus as far as I'm concerned. This time around, it's retitled under the name Command Matrix, each corresponding to the deck commands themselves. 3 are unlocked initially with the usual max of 8 obtainable through another linked system. The commands are again organized by attack, magic, and items, and are all given more depth and customization here. Each commands are given a limited amount of memory for balancing purposes, and 2 can be placed in a slot, each possessing 3 sections, 2 blue and 1 red. If the 2 commands in the blue are compatible, the red slot can be test converted into a new command and is the one seen on the deck command in the field. Otherwise, the red command is simply a more powerful version of the first blue command. Defeating Heartless will grant command points that are used to upgrade installed commands similar to Birth by Sleep. When maxed out, they can be permanently combined into the new command if linked correctly, the move potentially upgraded with an overspec bonus that affects other aspects of the combat system, such as a higher max level and refilling the clock gauge more quickly, or possessing a shorter reload time. More on the former a bit further in. This command conversion is Recoded's take on Synthesis, and each command can max out at level 100, so there's a ton of gameplay potential and meters to fill out if you enjoy it, and can now track down the DS original game. Now that the basics are introduced, let's return to the story. After Datasaur is introduced to his Keyblade and fights off a few Heartless, he opens up his door and is transported to Destiny Islands, much like the real Sora's first adventure. The islands are dotted with the various red and black bug blocks, and Mickey gives Datasaur a quick rundown of events via a sort of muffled voiceover from the monitor, appropriately monitoring events. After deleting a few bug blocks, Datasaur, now simply called Sora unless specified mainly for my sanity here, finds the door in their secret place on the island. Being presented with the message, "There's a road for the taking if you end our world's aching," in his head, Sora is compelled to bring out his Keyblade as a bright light floods the screen, blinding the Disney characters watching him. After it fades, they spot the same message as a new entry in the journal, contemplating what world the message is referring to. The hooded figure then shows up to Sora, echoing the same message, pointing him towards a keyhole being his next goal. Sora then unlocks the keyhole to the digital Destiny Islands, repurposed and recoded to entering the local boss that is generating the bugs of each world. Fittingly, a Darkseid is the boss for Destiny Islands, and Sora eventually defeats the Heartless for the nth time in the series, following the events of the first game as the islands get sucked into darkness and throwing Sora into a corridor of darkness. Of particular note in the HD film in 2.5, they actually animated most of the fights this time around, making for a less jarring experience than the one seen in the Days film in 1.5, so that's overall a good job. The Disney characters are then presented with the entry, "There are more hurts than the one you have just undone," which is followed by a scene depicting Ansem, in his robed form when he was a floating heart, opening a corridor of darkness for Riku during the destruction of Destiny Islands. Confused at his appearance in the journal, since Jiminy wasn't present for this event and couldn't have written it down, they track down Sora in Traverse Town, which was his next world. He wakes up to Pluto waking him as he did in the real world, and thus the first world is successfully debugged. This is the general flow of the game. Much like the first title, Sora must track down each world's keyhole, face the boss responsible for the world's corruption as it helps restore the journal with its bugs deleted. As such, this is a much quicker game/story to discuss, lending much to the "it's really skippable" stigma that the game carries, and not without some good reasons. Much of this seems like filler fluff between the meat of the story Kingdom Hearts is known for, and it is sprinkled throughout the game less than most would like, me included. At least the movie version is here to condense it all in 3 hours, right? And I'm here doing it even quicker, so let's keep going. Traverse Town is the next world and where the gameplay gimmicks start to show themselves properly in the DS version. Recoded attempts to make each world stand out more by giving each a unique sequence. In this case, Traverse Town is dotted with 2D side-scrolling sections, obviously not present in this HD recap. Might as well cover bug blocks here since they'll be dotted all over the video and it won't show any gameplay features otherwise. There are 14 types of these buggers, each ranging from simple normal blocks that can be deleted, are otherwise unbreakable, to helpful prize boxes of varying types. There are also bounce and slider blocks to make exploring more interesting, including ones that can damage Sora and sentient ones that act as enemies and corruption make physical. They're mainly here to remind you that Datasaur is in a data world, and to play around with the gameplay loop. Back to the plot. The gist of the story here is Sora is asked by Sid to help Huey, Dewey, and Louie when they went off to discover why the world is all screwy. Each of the triplets find and give Sora a mystery piece, including the hooded figure in an act that surprises Sora, the 4 light fragments eventually revealing the keyhole where Sora faces off against guard armor to debug their second world. In front of the monitor, the Disney characters reminisce about the events being paraphrased by Datascape, where Donald and Goofy first met Sora in Traverse Town, how they went there with Pluto, and if there are any data versions of themselves inside the journal as well. Putting their faith in Datascape, Mickey informs Sora of his power to seal away any lock as he succeeds, and the Disney characters are presented with the same mending message, catching on to the title's progression. They are rewarded with another scene, this time depicting the first time Sora, Donald, and Goofy teamed up after their first battle with guard armor, this time panning over to Pluto in the back alley, jumping into a corridor of darkness. This seemingly explains where the heck the dog went after the opening of the game, until he shows up back at the ending carrying a letter from the king. I always thought he was responding to being called earlier by Mickey, like a whistle, but here we are. Recoded's attempts at filling in previous plot holes in the original game is appreciated, though even I'd be curious to know if anyone was wondering about this one, cause not even I'm that pedantic, not in this topic anyway. Speaking of, small side note, since we're in Jiminy's journal for this title, the gameplay stat screen is instead handled by a computer systems report. It's a small detail, but again it's appreciated. As the Disney characters discuss where Pluto went, a topic they brought up before in Chain of Memories, before they forgot, they notice that Heartless have somehow invaded Disney Castle, something that shouldn't be possible thanks to the Cornerstone of Light that Kingdom Hearts 2 helped elaborate upon. When attempting to leave the library and check the rest of the castle, they find themselves locked in and with a new entry on the monitor: undo the hurt to unbar the way. Realizing they can only depend on Sora to debug the rest of the journal as quickly as possible to potentially free themselves, they find Sora has reached the next world. Sora finds himself in Wonderland, where events very similar to Chain of Memories occurs. Data Sora meets up with Data Alice, as she can't remember her own name, the Queen of Hearts sicks her card soldiers after them thanks to her stubbornness and losing her own memory, and the Cheshire Cat remains aloof and semi-helpful. The story and gameplay revolves around finding Inklings, not that kind, which end up being pieces of memory various characters of Wonderland have lost thanks to the bugs, to which Sora must return to their proper owners. Alice seems to have seen the keyhole Sora needs to find, but can't remember it. Thus, the world's search begins to remember what they've forgotten. The same organization-dressed member continues to visit Sora periodically, driving him forward with vague assurances that there's more hurt for Sora to mend, specifically mentioning true memories. Meanwhile, the main Disney characters recollect that Naminé is the aforementioned witch who can affect the memories of Sora and those connected to him, who was written about in Jiminy's second journal, which seems untouched when compared to the first one. Since Inklings are related to memory, they hypothesize that Naminé might be linked with what's going on in some way. Considering it seems we're finally going to have the characters uncover what happened in Castle Oblivion around a year ago, this is very welcome for those who enjoy continuity and the events of Chain of Memories 4 titles ago. The exclusive gimmick of Wonderland are rail shooter segments, alongside actually being able to explore an expanded Wonderland, including the Rose Bush mazes and general emphasis on exploration. The 3D shooter segments limit Sora's abilities, but he's also given overlay commands, specific use abilities for both these and the 2D segments in Traverse Town. There are fun little distractions that help vary up the gameplay in Recoded, and sadly none of this is recreated in the HD film. Once Sora fixes Wonderland, the hooded figure shows up again, echoing Ansem's words of "this world has been connected," and prompting Sora to chase after him through a corridor of darkness, while the Disney characters wonder if he's a member of Organization 13. As they wonder about who the mysterious man is, none other than Data Sora busts through the locked door into the library, the characters now seeing themselves on the monitor. To add to their confusion, the hooded figure reveals himself to look like Riku. This Data Riku reveals that he is a physical construct of the journal, who then brought the Disney characters into the data world, which Riku calls the Datascape, to help solve the mystery of the bugs. Data Riku is in possession of the memories that are written within the journal to protect them from the corruption and as a means to safeguard them. When contacting Chip and Dale from the inside, their communication is then cut off as a hacker attempts to break inside the Datascape, preventing the Disney characters' escape. They're linked to the real-world cut. Sora volunteers to go out and repair the link, setting off as the real Sora would to help his friends by bug-bashing the problems away. Next arriving at Olympus Coliseum, Riku informs Sora that he needs to find the keyhole once again as a means to take out one of the bugs responsible for messing with their link. This will lead him to the world's core. In-game, this is done via system sectors, areas entered through back doors that lead Sora into a multi-floor dungeon of sorts. These are then used for extra challenges later in the game, but since none of this is featured in the story much, let's just continue on. Eventually, Sora is told by Phil that Hercules went into the Coliseum labyrinth to investigate the source of the bugs, naturally concluding that Hades is responsible. This was a welcome area to expand upon Olympus, as the gameplay then shifts into a Final Fantasy-style turn-based JRPG system. This was fanservice I unabashedly enjoyed, but I also enjoy recoded shaking up of gameplay styles, so take that as you will. To add to the illusion, Cloud once again returns to give it that authentic Final Fantasy feeling, where Sora and Hercules fight him once again, then have a choice of adding him to the party, while the canon choice is obviously yes. The combat's very reminiscent of the Mario RPGs, with timed hits and being able to reduce damage if you time a block and the like. Deck commands are replaced with compiled commands to deal specific damage, like attacking in a row, causing area of effect attacks, and healing with special licenses. It's a solid system overall, but I'm also a biased fan of turn-based RPGs, so take that as you will. The player is given a choice of doing 5, 15, or 30 layers in the labyrinth, and depending on which is selected determines what was causing the world's bugs. 5 layers it's Cerberus, 15 it's the Rock Titan, and the full 30 is the Ice Titan. Recoded is very fine-tunable in its difficulty settings this time around, but for plot purposes it's meant to take all 30 layers in the game. The HD film recap ends this after fighting Cerberus and Hades, but the general gist is the same overall. While the Disney characters congratulate Sora and company for their victory, Donald wonders why they didn't get another video from the monitor this time around. Riku explains that what they were seeing were memories from the journal. Removing the world's bugs unlocked deeper memories, explaining why Jiminy doesn't recall any of the events he wasn't there to record. Just kinda go with it. They then spot the real Pete inside Olympus, having slipped in the same way that they did, running off to Agrabah with Sora following suit.
He must be up to something. Quick, after him! Right.
Agrabah is pretty straightforward compared to the other worlds, without a gimmick for itself either. Doesn't mean it's bad, the Cave of Wonders always shifts in accordance to every game it's featured in, but the point still stands that this is yet another visit to Agrabah in a time where many fans were sick of the world at this point in time. I felt it was used fine here, but I agree that the next time I want to see Agrabah is if they adapt Aladdin and the King of Thieves as a wrap-up to the world once and for all. I just really like that movie. As such, let me address the rest of the gameplay details since Agrabah doesn't have much of its own. Leveling up and stats are affected by the stat matrix, designed as a circuit board and is very similar to Final Fantasy X's Sphere Grid. It gets expanded upon after each chapter is completed, and unlocks more CPUs as you do such, installing chips between them and increasing in their effectiveness. These chips are virtually the same as the panel system in Days, though like the Sphere Grid in Final Fantasy X, they are linear paths that have various chips inserted between them to reach other parts of the matrix. These chips behave exactly like panels. You can install level up chips, HP boosts, magic items, elemental resistance chips, and boosting attack and defense stats. Dotted across the grid are bonus boosters, Recoded's name for abilities this time around, including staples like scan, dodge roll, blocking, all of Sora's movement enhancers, and survival abilities, including the combo pluses and recovery skills. All but scan can be toggled off and on, alongside the newer clock abilities, which I'll get to very soon. The stat matrix also has command and accessory expansions, which do exactly what they say. There are also 5 cheat tuners that can unlock as you continue through the game. These cheats allow you to change the difficulty at any time, adjusting how often enemies drop items by inversely affecting Sora's HP, increasing enemy strength alongside their prize drop rate, messing with CP and experience gains, and even adjusting every character's HP, when setting it to 0% will result in every character having 1 HP for a true challenge. It fits the data theme well enough, continuing the amount of customization that is given to a player in the games that originally debuted on the handhelds. Impeding progress are red and yellow bug chips that require debug devices to clear, the rewards of which are gained from completing system sector challenges and buying them from sector points awarded within them, prize blocks, and from certain quests. Last but not least is the gear matrix, the requisite equipment screen to help Sora with accessories and equip different keyblades, which in turn changes what the clock gauge does. Each of the 11 keyblades in the game has a corresponding chip, 01 being the only exclusive new keyblade this time around. One finish command chip can also be slotted into the gear matrix, changing the finisher that triggers when the clock gauge is filled by most actions like attacking and healing. As the gauges fill, it increases the clock levels and activating various effects based on the keyblade equipped. The bottom touchscreen on the Nintendo DS showcased the ability tree that could be tapped on screen to change the path if desired. These passive clock abilities, and abilities like Protect, Shell, Regen, and Autolife, each keyblade holding exclusive tiers, and once the gauge is completely filled, can trigger the equipped finish command. Pretty solid expansion on the systems built in the previous games, so let's just return to the end of Agrabah's plot. The usual players are present here. Jafar is using a replica of the magic lamp given to him by Pete in an attempt to take over Agrabah, and Datasora arrives greeted by the genie of the lamp. Played very well in the HD film by Jim Meskimen, an excellent voice double of the late Robin Williams' legendary take on the character. Granted, the genie was always voiced by Dan Castellaneta in the previous games, and more power to the voice of Homer Simpson, but the voice here in Recoded legitimately made me do a double take the first time I heard it. Just a nice touch, so good job in the casting there, Disney. Anyways, Aladdin and Jasmine are basically frozen in time. Sora goes through the Cave of Wonders to stop Jafar, he does, and everything seems to end on a happy note. While leaving the cave, Sora encounters Pete, who in turn summons the real Maleficent. Showcasing her power once again, not fully realizing what this Datascape is, notices that the Keyblades Data Sora is wielding is fake, and shatters the Keyblade and leaves Sora dejected, not realizing that this is a Data version of the real boy. Before he can be defeated by a horde of shadows, Mickey and Data Riku show up to bail Data Sora out. Pete reveals that he was also sucked into the Datascape since he was outside of the library at the time the journal sucked them all into the Datascape. When Pete realized he was in a larger world linking a bunch of other worlds together, he locked the other Disney characters' access out of the system and called Maleficent inside. Her intent to take over the Datascape is in the hopes that it can be a first step in taking over the real worlds as well, since it's connected to Disney Castle directly and supposedly bypassing the Cornerstone of Light by entering directly inside the castle. Maleficent then kidnaps Data Riku when he attempts to protect the digital world, vanishing with him and all the information on the Datascape. Sora apologizes for being unable to summon his Keyblade anymore, with King Mickey volunteering to go chase after the villains by himself, thanking Sora for all of his help. As Jiminy, Donald, and Goofy contemplate on what to do next, they notice that Sora went after Mickey to the final bugged world, Hollow Bastion, all on his own. Sora tracks down Pete and Hollow Bastion sans Keyblade, having to dodge Heartless on his way inside the castle, similar to the first game. Once he does, Pete traps Sora and summons a bunch of Heartless as Pete runs off to finish his plans, Goofy rescuing Sora in the nick of time, calling back to the original game once again. After catching up, they track down Donald, who was separated when the two entered Hollow Bastion after Sora. They find him in the lower waterway, and Goofy and Donald tell Sora not to worry about anything, being just as friendly to the digital version of their real friend. Gameplay-wise, it's nice to have Donald and Goofy fight alongside and force Sora after 2 games without them. You command them indirectly as you travel up through Hollow Bastion, eventually confronting Pete at the highest point in front of the world's keyhole. With Pete trapping Donald and Goofy, remarking how they're being friendly to a construct made up of zeros and ones, remarking how Sora and his Keyblade were always fake, reiterates up the whole "my friends are my power" shtick in the first game. This prompts Datasora to materialize his own Keyblade, Mickey showing up and saying Datasora's strength of heart managed to give him a genuine Keyblade this time around, thanks to the connections that he made with others during the game, similar to the real Sora once again. All of the reiteration of the themes the series so proudly cheeses up, Pete retreats into the keyhole, Sora entering alone to pay back all the help his Disney allies have given him. After battling Pete, Sora is then challenged by a reprogrammed Data Riku, echoing the possessed fight that occurred in the original title. After their conflict, Data Riku is thoroughly corrupted by bugs, prompting Datasora to enter his friend's personal Datascape in an attempt to fix him from the inside. The latter half of Hollow Bastion is inside Data Riku, a sort of best-of sector section, and also where the events of the story are slightly different in the HD film compared to the DS game. Namely in a boss fight with Pete and Maleficent, but it's largely skipped over in the film, so we'll run with what the series of events for simplicity and for its updated scenes in 2.5. Regardless, this is made a little better by showing the audience how Sora and Riku act in their downtime outside of the whole saving the world against the darkness thing that they do between battling the bugs. Riku warns Sora that the bugs are going to take him over and then the Datascape, giving him extra data that didn't originate in the journal that was inserted here by someone else. Hint, hint. Sora chooses to stay and help his friend, a bit of character moments occurring as Riku kept his identity secret early on to make sure that Sora strengthened up to take on the bugs without his help, showcasing the downside to Riku's constant lone wolfing of everything in the first trilogy of games. Once enough hurt has been mended, Riku presents Sora with a door to his innermost data, cautioning him about what he'll find inside there. Dropping an interesting piece of information, namely that he only met Sora on the Destiny Islands and not when he woke up in his doubts and heart, Sora enters and finds a replica of the Ansem-possessed Riku. Once their fight is concluded, the most recent of messages flashes on screen, 90% of data recovered, enough for an awakening. An eruption happening outside, Sora runs out and meets back up with the Disney characters, supposedly removing all of the bugs from the Datascape. Once they arrive in the real Disney castle, Chip and Dale, relieved to see everyone back home safely now, Datasora and Data Riku tell them that they'll be fine signing out now that their goal has been accomplished. Before they can do so, a massive bug awakens inside the Datascape, taking the form of Sora's Heartless as it attempts to delete the Datascape. Jiminy, remembering that the real Pete and Maleficent are still inside the Datascape, meaning that locking the Datascape is no longer a valid option, Sora dives in through the keyhole and finds the antagonist facing off against his giant Heartless, having evolved inside the Datascape on glitches as Sora grew stronger. Attacking them in a flash of light, Maleficent and Pete disappear, leaving Sora to take on his own Heartless. Sora's Heartless, while defeated alongside other fallen Heartless throughout the adventure, were being funneled into his Neo-Dark side, an amalgamation of all the dark data as a sort of anger and regret, since defeating Digital Heartless doesn't free any captured hearts. After a fight, Sora's Heartless transforming into Anti-Sora at one point, Mickey eventually joins in and helps destroy the shadow representing its true form. After the battle is won, Datasora thanks Mickey, reiterating a bunch of the usual themes, with Maleficent and Pete being escorted out of the Datascape by Datascape. As the villains leave, Maleficent suggests that she realizes why the Datascape was so familiar to her. When Pete asks what she means, the Dark Fairy recalls an ancient tome called the Book of Prophecies, capable of writing down events that have yet to transpire, as well as creating worlds and powers that are yet to exist. When Pete rightfully remarks a book like that seems too good to be true, as if from a fairy tale, Maleficent counters that it's no less believable than the Datascape they just came from, itself being a construct of worlds that exists in the real world. She then proceeds to say that fairy tales can hold some truth in them, suggesting they discover if there's a link between Jiminy's journal and the Book of Prophecies. Pete is then on board following this breadcrumb trail as Maleficent begins concocting a plan to obtain this data King Mickey has acquired. It makes you wonder where she learned this information, huh?
Don't you think it might just be worth our while to search for a connection? Perhaps there's a link of some sort between that so-called journal of theirs and the Book of Prophecies.
I'd say with that, we are onto something huge, eh, Maleficent?
Ours is not a lost cause. First, we must take possession of this data of theirs.
This is where it might feel that the game is wrapping up, with the Datascape free of bugs, Datasora sealing up the Datascape as Mickey returns to Disney Castle, with an ending rendition of Dearly Beloved playing as an adorable Sora thanks them. But Goofy accurately points out that they never discovered the meaning behind the weirdness of the journal, as Data Riku pops up to inform them that a new world has popped up inside the Datascape as extra data, similar to the extra data Riku gave to Sora for the Disney characters to analyze. In need of him once again, Riku helps Mickey re-enter the Datascape as Datasora reawakens once again in Traverse Town, Mickey instead showing up to fill him in on events to catch him up to speed. Mickey reintroduces himself, reiterating the message, "Their hurting will be mended when you return to end it," quickly readjusting to the power of the Keyblade once more as they finally delve into the core mystery of the plot this time around. Datasora quickly accepts the situation, Sora being a stand-up guy no matter if he's real or data, as he follows Mickey into the new data in the journal. The heart doing the remembering for you sort of deal from Chain of Memories. Speaking of which, the world Datasora finds himself in is none other than Castle Oblivion, Mickey gone and the original hooded figure from the beginning of the game showing up. Taking on the role that Marluxia did in Chain of Memories, with the same "in here to find is to lose and to lose is to find," the figure presenting Sora with a card with a picture of Disney Islands on it. Saying it will lead him to the truth, Sora decides to follow along with the familiar feeling figure into the final world in the Datascape, to find the truth that sleeps up ahead. Fans who've been keeping tabs on the previous 5 games will likely appreciate this third act as the Chain of Memories chaser to the main game's Kingdom Hearts retelling. Time for some resolutions. As memories from the first adventure flash around him, Sora remains confused as to the reason why this is even necessary and what he's even doing here. The mysterious figure realizes that his memory has been reset, and instructs Sora to do whatever he wants, vanishing and claiming everyone here is an illusion. Leaving the Keyblade wielder confused before spotting Tidus, Waka, and Selphie from Disney Islands, Sora's left to figure out things on his own. Gameplay-wise, the data version of Castle Oblivion works very much like the real thing. World cards are used to advance through the structure, a sort of choose-your-own-outcome sort of puzzle rooms. Instead of transfiguring the white rooms into exact replicas as in Chain of Memories, the characters from Sora's memory don't see anything but their worlds, as Sora rather sees the white rooms of Castle Oblivion simply shuffled around. Depending on your actions in each world, one of the 3 different ending cards is given to Sora, representing the normal, alternate, and extra endings. These don't affect anything but representing what the hooded figure says. Sora's off-script at this point, suggesting that he can even break the hearts of those he meets because everything here isn't real after all, they're only illusions. The HD film only shows the shared outcomes instead of the multiple choice scenarios, the first being from Riku. He presents Sora with a memory of Riku atop Big Ben, with KHIII still missing her heart from the first Kingdom Hearts, suggesting their common link at the time was hurt, both of his friends having lost themselves. Sora insists that he would have gone and helped end the hurt, this Riku saying that he did and will, confusing Sora as to the purpose of this inquiry. The illusory Riku suggests that Sora is like a sponge in this respect. He sucks up any pain that's thrown at him and leaves being a better person, suggesting that was very true of the real Sora. His greatest asset is being himself, letting his heart be his guiding key, as it were. Further along after each world, the hooded figure continues to mock Sora, already forgetting his friends on Destiny Islands, saying that Sora will forget everything once the illusion's over. Remarking that forgetting things means it wasn't important to begin with, even people, Sora insists that this is wrong, being presented with mere worlds who are now strangers to Data Sora. Trying to plant the idea that Sora can act as callous as he wants against illusions made of Data, since it won't matter once he forgets them, Sora refuses to hurt anyone, claiming that ache would remain with him if he tried to act guilt-free, even to those who don't really exist. As Data Sora continues through the castle, he wonders if this pain is heartache, seeing as how he must not have forgotten everything to still feel for people that he can't quite remember. This feeling must be frustrating, but Sora knows that this is the key to unlocking these sleeping memories, despite how much this hurt gnaws at him. This is something the organization's dressed member chastises Sora for, saying that by accepting that hurt was the first step in being entrapped by darkness forever. Rejecting this as some sort of trick to drag him into the darkness, Sora continues onward even if he's lost and confused, deciding to carry the hurt instead of forgetting what's inside of his heart. While still separated from Sora, Mickey's voice finally manages to reach out to him, showing the boy a vision of Donald and Goofy, helping reiterate that the memories from the past are etched deep into anyone's heart, causing those pangs of remembrance seen here and throughout the series. After using his final card, Sora is confronted one last time with who is now known to the audience as Data Roxas, his face being visible through the hood earlier on as well. After hearing Sora's insistence on holding onto his hurt, even at the risk of falling into the darkness, Data Roxas flies into a rage, summoning his Oathkeeper and Oblivion Keyblades and attacking Sora outright, determined to show him what real hurt feels like. After their fight, Sora still refuses to end this Roxas, sensing what he called an intense, familiar, sharp pain. Smiling at Sora realizing the connection he shares with people and himself, Roxas congratulates Sora on understanding hurt. Entering Sora, now that his role of making sure Sora can take on the hurt inside of him is complete, Roxas reunites with his Data counterpart, Sora taking on the onslaught of feelings and memories that aren't his own, remarking on his first and last summer vacation, leading to the finale of Recoded.
Go home. And a sunset that's comforting. My first and my last summer vacation. You can rest easy. I've got you now.
Meeting up with Mickey afterwards, they use the final world card that goes further into Castle Oblivion itself to solve the mystery of the cryptic messages. The duo are greeted by a copy of Nominate, Mickey helping make sense of the events of the title. While Sora thanks her for helping fix his memories according to Mickey, Nominate refuses to accept the thanks, claiming it was her fault to begin with. Nominate explains that the bugs appearing in the journal was her doing, saying that she found sleeping memories deep inside of the real Sora's heart, memories of those connected to him. While initially confused and thinking that she messed up when restoring his chain of memories, Nominate concludes that these memories belong inside of Sora, and eventually will have to be awakened. Cautioning that the pain in these memories are dangerous and could break Sora's heart if not handled correctly, Nominate decided to write the initial message and hoped the bugs from these memories were to ensure someone would be able to figure out this message, since the real Nominate is no longer around to do such. To all of this, Data Sora speaks for the audience.
You kinda lost me a few minutes ago.
You don't have to understand it. You have already learned how to face the hurt, Sora.
I did?
You most certainly did. At times, the pain can be wiped away. But there's also a pain that always stays with you. There's only one way to deal with that. You face it head on, and then you accept it. And if it happens that the hurt is too great for you to bear it alone, well then you turn to a friend close to your heart.
Oh. It'll bring us closer together. The hurt will only make us stronger. I'm willing to try. I'm ready to face all those memories that you found. It might have to be painful, but I can take it.
Sora.
Naminé nonetheless says that Sora is up to the challenge, claiming since he is so willing to help mend the hurt, this means that the real Sora would also be willing to face his destiny on saving those that need his help. Touching these memories alongside Mickey, Datasora sees the real Sora's hidden truths, showcasing Axel, Roxas, Naminé, and Xion. Realizing something bad happened to them, Naminé reveals that Diz inserted results of his data into the real Sora as a means to clear his conscience. The Wayfinder trio are then shown to the duo, Mickey recognizing Terra, Ventus, and Aqua as being tied to the Keyblade's truth. Datasora realizes that he's met the other two, while having a special connection to the third. Now realizing what's at stake, Mickey concludes that now is the time for these memories to be awakened by the real Sora, determined to let the real Sora know of what's needed. Before they leave, Datasora thanks Data Naminé, a completed Phantom Promise hopefully signaling a real promise kept in the future. The game then formally ends, the credits rolling before the now expected secret ending plays, alongside new scenes added for the HD film. The epilogue catches up with the endings of both Kingdom Hearts 2 and Birth by Sleep, with Mickey revealing what was in his letter given to the Destiny trio. While we never did find out what was in his second letter that Pluto had leading up to Chain of Memories, it turns out that all of Recoded was meant to explain the third letter as implied by Birth by Sleep's true ending, and how Mickey knew of the past events that are tied to Sora's heart. Inside, Mickey explains that now is the time to save the 7 characters who are hurting and depending on Sora to save them, suggesting that Sora's previous adventures were likely to ensure that he can take on this new task. Sora, Riku, and KHIII look upwards to the sky, sharing all of their destinies as the credits roll.
Sora, Riku, KHIII. The truth behind the Keyblade has found its way through so many people, and now I know that it rests in your hearts. Sora, you are who you are because of those people, but they're hurting, and you're the only one who can end their sadness. They need you. It's possible that all your journeys so far have been preparing you for this great new task that's waiting for you. I should have known there were no coincidences, only links in a much larger chain of events. And now the door to your next journey is ready to be opened.
This is usually where I throw in the various scenario mysteries, though as the length of this video shows, there's not much to discuss from a meta perspective this time around, lending credits to how easily this game can be summarized, even for my pedantic style of videos. Nevertheless, Recoded does a good job of beginning the job of reconnecting all of the games thus far, something that will become very apparent when we hit the secret endings coming up. The main takeaway is the focus on data this far. After being introduced in Kingdom Hearts 2 to varying degrees of the concept, such as digitizing an entire town and people into a simulated Twilight Town with constructs that act like the individuals that they're based on, which was already a trip for many players. Now with the Datascape being a thing, made out of the memories of a journal and being personified with an AI of its own, we've really expanded upon what's going on in the Kingdom Hearts universe. One plus to Recoded is how it demonstrates the personalities of Sora, Riku, Roxas, and Naminé via dialogue throughout the game. While Sora is the optimistic character that some fans believe is now flanderized to the point of excessive shonen optimism, there is a simplistic charm in the main protagonist that it's kinda hard for me to stay mad at the characterization, even when it's partially true. Sora was able to genuinely have a personality in Chain of Memories especially, ranging from that unfaltering optimism, even in his darkest hours of confusion, to legitimate anger at feeling that he's the only one who got his priorities in the right spot in wanting to help somebody, even if these memories were implanted at the time. Everything that happens to Sora is real to him, even his data version. Likewise, his interactions with Data Riku were a nice insight into their relationship, with Riku constantly teasing while subtly praising his younger best friend, even if it took a few games for the real Riku to finally get it through his head that it's okay to accept help after spending the majority of 2 games atoning for his mistakes from the first game. As far as Data Roxas goes, his use as the messenger to test if the real Sora would be able to handle all the hurt that we now know is inside of him was a nice use of the character. This version of Sora's nobody seemed to be much more cruel and quick to anger than the real Roxas, but it was always an act. Seeing if he could push Sora into questioning his own beliefs isn't a bad way to use Sora's other. Having Datanamine show up to give the present characters the context of the largely forgotten stint in Castle Oblivion was also a nice touch. Since Chain of Memories has been given a lot of allusions to in the last 3 games, but it's never been fully acknowledged beyond Riku and Mickey being the only ones left right now who can recall half of that story. Thus, those waiting for the payoff for them to properly thank Naminé are finally being thrown a bone here, as Mickey's third letter is all about passing on the real Naminé's message given to him by her Data counterpart. Because of the memories she found when restoring the real Sora's memories, it's now seemingly time for Sora to go help those who made him who he is today. Seeing Naminé, Axel, Roxas, Xion, Terra, Ventus, and Aqua again all but assures that someone you care about in this series has the chance to resurface and free them from their varying fates. While this may seem odd given how some of these characters seem to have gotten a happy ending, while some were missing, destroyed, or not even complete things anymore, this will become more clear very shortly. Running off the ending of Birth by Sleep once more, Data Riku was able to present Data Sora and thus Mickey the extra data that Diz, aka Ansem the Wise, left inside Sora during his long sleep, which no doubt will be addressed very soon. What information the sage found is unclear, but the seeds planted from the prequel are finally catching up to the present, especially with some of the usual sequel tease lore tidbits sprinkled throughout parts of the journey. In particular is what Maleficent put together after her and Pete's stay in the Datascape. Mentioning this book of prophecies is obviously setting up something to be dealt with very soon, as is its potential link to Jiminy's journal. So put a pin in these questions for now as we handle the 2 secret ending scenes in Recoded to cap off the second trilogy and open the doors wide open to the 3rd and final act of the Dark Seeker saga. Rewinding a bit in time for signs of what's next, we see Mickey back in Yen Sid's tower, claiming that they're close to divining where Ventus's heart lies, the ex-Keyblade Master concurring that they only need now to figure out where Terra's is. Excited that he'll be able to save his 3 lost friends after 11 plus years, Mickey is warned by Yen Sid that they now must consider what Xehanort intends to do next. Confused, Mickey reminds the audience that both halves of Xehanort are now gone, Ansem, Seeker of Darkness that controlled the Heartless, and Xemnas, who was the superior of the Nobodies, both defeated by Sora in Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2 respectively. This addresses something about the lore that was known about since Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix in behind-the-scenes interviews and Q&A sessions all the way back in 2007, but was never explicitly stated in the games until now. Yen Sid brings up that the defeat of both Ansem and Xemnas is precisely the problem that they now face ahead of them. The destructions of both halves of Xehanort has now freed Xehanort's heart, once possessed by Ansem, and his discarded body that formed the existence of Xemnas has now been defeated as well. By freeing both, they now guarantee that Master Xehanort's original body will inevitably be reconstructed, something that Mickey is confident that they can handle alongside Sora and Riku, no matter what roads Xehanort has left open. Yen Sid agrees that both boys are strong, but still aren't true Keyblade Masters like Mickey is, dropping the first big bombshell.
Tell me, would a single one of you suffice if what you faced was not a single one of him?
What? What do you mean?
Mickey, please summon Sora hither. Riku as well.
Of course, but why?
To show us the mark of mastery.
And that's not all. Destiny is the second secret ending added for the 2.5 HD collection, beginning from the perspective of someone in Ansem's study in Radiant Garden, specifically the computer room where Space Paranoids is located, as well as where various experiments were conducted above ground. Lying on the ground here are the bodies of Sigbar, Vexen, Lexius, Zexion, Saïx, and Axel, though that's not quite the case on closer inspection. We are now shown who we now recognize as Braig, Zigbar's nobody, in his Birth by Sleep outfit before he joined the organization, meaning that we're seeing members of the organization return to their original selves. So instead we are now seeing Dylan, Evan, Alias, Ienzo, Isa, and Lee lying unconscious on the floor. As Braig comments on how things are on track, he notices that Lord Xemnas being MIA means that the party has already begun in his own informal way. Braig wonders aloud what it is that the old man wants, addressing his only conscious participant as not knowing what's going on in his own head, pointing to a silver-haired youth with piercing yellow eyes and a black cloak. As he remarks about going wherever it is he is destined to, Braig snarks that it sounds like neither of them knows what Xehanort's truly planning. The youth then comments about how each Keyblade Master is passed on a Keyblade of their very own, and that many have been further passed along through time. More were forged for subsequent Keyblade Masters in the distant past, revealing that Master Xehanort's Keyblade is currently the most ancient Keyblade remaining in existence. This is what he claims is his destiny, though it has yet to transpire, Braig brushing it off casually as it's all connected to the Keyblade War and that he's busy with his own plans as well. He then presents the teen with quite an ominous question, leaving quite the cliffhanger.
So, which poor soul will it be?
And that wraps up Kingdom Hearts Recoded. Naturally, the biggest takeaways from this 6th installment is definitely the contents of its secret endings. Not only did this title finally reveal in-game about how the destruction of a Heartless and the nobody of an individual means that they will be reconstructed as their original self, apparently this means that Xehanort is also coming back, and this time he won't be alone according to Yen Sid. Add to that the familiar-looking youth speaking with Braig, it doesn't take too much of a leap to infer who that is, but what's about to occur is something left to the imagination for the time being, as Recoded leads directly into the next title. And this time, Yen Sid plans on conducting a Mark of Mastery for Sora and Riku to name them true Keyblade Masters. As the constant messages of Reconnect Kingdom Hearts implies, things are beginning to come into focus, beginning to link the current 6 games into a clear narrative moving forward. As such, much of the groundwork is laid out for what seems to be the inevitable clash between Sora and Master Xehanort, the true cause of the current events as revealed by Birth by Sleep. If you have a favorite game out of the 6 titles thus far, there's a good chance that you're going to be rewarded going forward somewhere along the line. Having wrapped up the second trilogy acting as the Act 2 of the overarching Darkseeker Saga storyline, it's all coming to a head. So while the length of this video sort of reaffirms how skippable Recoded is in the grand scheme of things, especially now that the HD recap movie is going to be the main attraction going forward for its collective 3-hour runtime, I do feel for the pretty entertaining DS game that's going to be lost through time for a bit alongside Days. I feel that both DS games would be cracking good titles if given the full remake treatment, but I understand why they weren't for the HD remix collections here. The story is what's vital to know going forward, as we'll find out in the 7th game. While Recoded isn't perfect as a game or a story, it is a nice lighthearted adventure that is trying to entertain in its gameplay while trying to ease players gently into a story that's beginning to line the pieces up, as it were. While I can recommend the game as a fun action RPG, the story is something that will fly over anyone's head if this is their first Kingdom Hearts, and isn't something I'd recommend if anyone were to ask me where to start on the series. Of course, if you've been following this series of videos, you already know what I think. I've made it very clear that release order is the best way to get into this insane series, whose story just gets more convoluted and crazy as we continue. If you have been watching my particular series, thank you for coming with me this far. A bunch of these remaining mysteries are about to get payoffs, and as even more wrinkles get thrown in for good measure, so I hope that I'm recapping these games as clearly as possible. The next 4 videos are catching up very quickly to what consists of the 3rd act of the overall storyline. Kingdom Hearts 3 is only 2 months away as of the publishing date of this video, and I've got 4 more videos to release before the conclusion, covering the 3rd and final act of Xehanort's 4th dimensional chess game. They're much more story-heavy than gameplay-centric for various reasons, barring the next title, so I'll do my best to make sure that everyone's up to speed on the story as we approach the point where I don't have definitive answers for some of these mysteries. If it feels like I flew by the lore implications just now, that's because it leads directly into the 7th title, which just so happens to be the next video. So if you're curious, join me next time as we drop back into a mainline level title in Kingdom Hearts 3D.